In part 1 of Norman Baker, we learned about his beginnings and rise to fame. Now, we will hear about his time in Eureka Springs and creating a hospital that didn't actually cure patients.
We're now standing here in the morgue area of what used to be the hospital, and this whole area down here in the basement of the hotel was used for the morgue. So Norman Baker arrives in Eureka Springs in 1937, and he buys the hotel and turns into his third cancer-curable hospital. So he had 2 parts to his cure for cancer. There was the medicine, which is the most important part, and it was called Secret Formula Number 5. Now it consisted of the following material: ground watermelon seed, corn silk, water, glycerin, clover, and a dash of carbolic acid. So they cooked this stuff up behind closed doors. They'd filter it, they'd distill it. And what they would do with this material, they would inject it into the people here. They would inject it into their bodies at the sites of their tumors. Now, Norman was not doing any injecting at this point in his career, but he was just the administrator here because he was trying to stay out of that legal trouble that he had up in Iowa. So he presented other men as doctors here. He called them eclectic doctors. He called them cancer specialists. One of them turned out to be a coal miner. And these are the kind of guys he was hiring here at the hospital. Now they had nurses, and these nurses, I don't know if they were just very well paid or true believers, but they were the ones who were really doing the treatments. They would give these people sometimes several shots a day of this material. And it can be painful, but they did not have any real medicine around here because there's no real doctors. So if you're in pain here at the hospital, you didn't get morphine. You got aspirin and mental therapeutics. And that was the other part of his cure, mental therapeutics. He would train you in the methods of mental therapeutics, train you to use your mind to overcome your disease. Actually, it was just part of the old vaudeville act. His act in the vaudeville days, he was the hypnotist, he was the mentalist, he was that guy. On the 3rd floor, Mr. Baker had an area that he called the asylum. And this is a part of the building where he would ostensibly, put people who were, having difficult issues with the treatment. But in reality, he was putting people in there who were about to die. What would happen is some of these poor people, they'd show up here very, very ill, and he would treat them, they would deteriorate, and as they got near death, well, he didn't want them to die in front of the other patients, so he sneaked them back in the asylum, put them behind closed doors, and tell everybody else they were just fine, doing very well, you'll see them very soon. Of course, they'd never see them again, they would die. So those are the folks who would wind up down here in the morgue. The area we're in right now, we call it nowadays the pharmacy, and we call it that because of these jars and bottles on the wall behind me. These jars and bottles, they were discovered here on the property of the hotel only 4 years ago. It was in 2019 in February. Our gardener was digging a spot for a compost pile. She began to find these jars and bottles. Well, we wound up bringing the University of Arkansas's archaeological survey team over here, and they did a dig in April of 2019, and they found more than 400 artifacts, primarily jars and bottles, medicine bottles, specimen jars, that were from the Baker Hospital. Now, we don't know what's in them yet. We're still working on that. So we do know something about some of the medical specimens that were found. There were 3 or 4 jars found that had alcohol and what appeared to be some kind of tissue. We were having a difficult time finding out what it was, so we actually wound up getting in contact with a doctor at the University of Arkansas Medical School who volunteered to study these things for us. In one of these jars, it contained about a walnut-sized piece of tissue. He opened it up, sliced it up, and looked at it under the microscope. But it turned out that it was a decubitus ulcer, which is the technical name for bed sore. Actually, the bed sore from someone's behind. So that's what Norman Baker was holding up in these jars, and probably telling people they were tumors, because he claimed to be able to cure cancer without using surgery, radiation, X-ray, or serums. Hundreds of people came here to the hospital, and hundreds of people died of cancer because it was not a real cure. Now, as far as we know, only 42 people died on the premises, as far as we know. And we determined that from looking at death certificates here in our city. So Claude Fuller decided he needed to get rid of Norman Baker because he was causing a lot of trouble. So Claude's brother was the postmaster here in Eureka Springs. And he went down to his brother's office one day and he said, "Brother, Norman Baker is mailing out fraudulent brochures to the U.S. mail. Isn't that some kind of a crime?" And it is, it's mail fraud. So they got the postal inspectors involved and they did an investigation. It's a bit like getting Al Capone for tax evasion instead of murder. They got Norman Baker for 7 counts of mail fraud. And he spent 3 years and 3 months in Leavenworth Penitentiary as a guest of the federal government. He paid a $4,000 fine, got out of jail in 1944, regained his fortune, and retired to a luxury yacht in Miami where he died in 1958 at the age of 76. His funeral was not very well attended. His own brother refused to go to the funeral. 5 people did show up, and we think we probably owed them money. And this is a true story. The funeral director had to go to the community college in Muscatine County and hire 6 young men at $5 apiece to be the pallbearers because nobody else would do it. His legacy as a con man cancer cure seems to be what he'll be best be remembered for.